Heat Map Fantasy Sports live. We're live, pal. NFL Week 14. Doug going solo. Gutta has the week off, living his best life. Check us out. Heat Map Fantasy Sports over on my Twitter page at Bankster17. Pinned tweet. Get you the link to sign up. $3.99 per week for access to all of our content. We got it all. NFL, NBA, hockey, baseball, soccer, golf, tennis, NASCAR, MMA, soccer, all of it. EuroLeague. I talk Rainmakers occasionally. Talk WWE occasionally. Probably missed some sports in there. We cover them too. Come check us out under $4 a week. Pinned tweets. So yep, riding solo today. We're gonna talk cash. Cash I thought played itself pretty well. Oh, heat map is live for. Is the heat map posted? It's not. Hopefully someone can post the heat map today for hockey. Crush hockey. I'm asking right now in our Slack chat what you get with a membership. Posting here so we don't forget to post the heat map. That's a good idea. That'll be live soon. Hockey's insane right now. We're just hammering NHL. It's kind of a crappy slate for hockey today. But heat map's up. Goalie math is done. Well, heat map will be up. Goalie math is done. Should be really good. We're going to crush it, as we always do. But today, right now, talking NFL, talking cash games. I like the slate for cash. It's the second week in a row I've been back on the cash train. We cashed very easily last week by not trying to eat. I'm not saying I didn't try to eat the chalk. We didn't try to chase the chalk. Burrow was the chalk quarterback. He had a great week. I went with Geno over Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was one of the other chalkier quarterbacks. Geno was 0.5%. Didn't care. I like the matchup for Geno. I love the price. Allowed me to work in the guys I wanted to work in. And even with a dud here and there, cashed really easily last week. I think this slate similarly lines up really well for cash. I think they're just some really obvious plays. We definitely want one of the things I put in my article this week was how many Detroit, Minnesota players are too many, because this is a weather controlled environment. Highest total on the slate by 6 points. We want to get as much action in this game as possible. But we don't want to overstack, right? This game duds. You don't want like 4 guys, 5 guys from this game. But I do think quarterback wise, I mean, for me, quarterbacks this week, no point in spending up. There's so many good low. Geno Smith, again, Kirk Cousins. I have no problem with either of those guys. I think Huntley's going to be fine. Last week he was really good, and Huntley's always been good when he gets to start. I like the Pittsburgh defense a little bit though, so I'm not really running to use Huntley, but 10 rushes is awesome along with his 32 attempts. 16 points in cash would be fine, but Jared Goff's going to be the chalk quarterback, and in this case, I am going to play the chalk because he just appeals to me quite a bit. He had he's had some really good games this year, but mostly when he's playing at home, he's just a stud. 22 fantasy points per game at home. 17 of his 19 touchdowns have been at home. He has less interceptions in more games, 2 more games at home. Not averaging averaging 42 more yards per game at home. Just a far better player at home. So we're gonna roll Jared Goff. I think this was one of the easier cash quarterback plays of the week. One of the better year of the year. I mean, just an easy cash quarterback. You just roll Goff at 5,600. Everyone's going to be on him. There's no reason not to use Goff. Running back, there's conversation to be had. I don't think McCaffrey factors into cash. Great tournament play, but in cash, he's going up against Tampa. Tampa's got a good defense. We're not worried about Barkley. Derrick Henry, I started to consider more as the week went on. He's had a real rough stretch with 3 out of his last 4 games being awful. And really, before that, he was fine. He needs 24, 25 points this week to get there. He's playing Jacksonville, who he generally does really well against. Hasn't played him yet this year. But to me, the lack of work in the passing game, and we're still not getting all the way there. Here and there, if he busts a long one, he'll be okay. But otherwise, it's 2 catches, 14 yards, 0 target. I just don't like the volume for the price in the passing game. Running game, he should be fine. He could run 25 times, 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think that's great for a tournament, but I just can't go there in cash. Not at that price. Chubb, I just can't ever use in cash because total lack of target volume. Just one target, one target, one target. Those 3 targets were nice, but what did he do? They were down, and if he's not getting that volume in the running game, it's just not there. So I'm not loving Chubb. He's fine in tournaments, but I'm not using him in cash. So cash for me came down to these 2 guys pretty obviously. Dalvin Cook, another piece to that Minnesota game. I considered Hawkinson and Jefferson, but they're just too expensive considering the other options at those price points, at those positions, I mean. Whereas I think, Dalvin Cook, he's still going to get 20, 25 touches. He's been pretty consistently 19 to 22, 23 touches. And this is a great matchup against the Detroit defense that's awful against the run, terrible against running backs. He gets enough work in the passing game, 3 to 5 targets pretty consistently, other than a small little stretch where he didn't. But I think he was a pretty easy play for cash. Joe Mixon, the other obvious play, he should get a heavy workload. I'm not worried about Samaje Perine eating into his workload. He's a target guy, 3 or more targets in all but like 1 game this year. Should get 18 to 20 carries. He's just generally there. Only needs about 20 points to get there for cash in a matchup against the Browns team that absolutely cannot stop running backs, and under 7K, which is stupid. Just a dumb price. The other guys I considered for cash, I thought Pollard would be interesting for cash, but I'm fine. I'm using a lot more in tournaments. I'm not using the cash at all. Target volume's been fluctuating. Usage in the rushing game has been a little fluctuating. I think stacking him with Elliott is awesome in GPPs, but neither gets enough of a workload to make it worthwhile. Obviously, these guys are not worth it. We'll talk about Miles Sanders for GPPs in a little bit. DeAndre Swift's an interesting case, but I'm not using 3 Lions in cash. I do think he's going to see the lion's share, dad joke, lion's share of the work for Detroit this week, and I think he's a great tournament option, particularly as a pivot off of Amon-Ra St. Brown as a run back or a mini stack with maybe Justin Jefferson or TJ Hawkinson. If you're using another primary stack like Seattle or something, but I just can't go there yet in cash. Just not getting enough inside the 5 work, and we don't know. We can assume he's going to get the workload, but we don't know. Further down, I just don't like Rachaad White enough with Leonard Fournette maybe playing, and against San Francisco, aside from the target volume, we just don't. They're so good against the run, so I'm just not 100% sure when he's in cash. Donta Foreman gets absolutely no work in the passing game, and I just can't be using a guy in cash, even at this price, who's so touchdown dependent. I'm not ready to use Bam Knight again, even though I really like the work he's put in. I don't think Bam Knight is a guy that we can use in cash this week now with Michael Carter presumably back. I do think Knight will still get 10 to 14 carries. He'll still get 3 to 5 targets, but we don't know. And so that makes him more of a tournament play for me. Travis Homer, I like a lot. I just don't think we need to go there in cash because we don't know how the workload is going to split between him and Tony Jones, and they could just throw the ball 40 times against Carolina. So we don't know. Tournament play, sure. Cash game, very borderline. I don't think we need to go there. And then I like James Cook quite a bit in cash. He's been seeing a ton more snaps, getting a bigger workload, definitely catching the passes. Game script against the Jets, the one to keep the game close. It is snowing here in New York, so they'll throw, but this could be more of a grinded out game, and Cook's going to start to see the workload. Again, I don't think we need to go here in cash, but I do think he's usable. But for my RB2, and we'll talk about what we're using in flex later, for my RB2, it's going to be Joe Mixon. $6,900 is just stupid, considering his potential workload in the matchup he has. Wide receiver really is Amon-Ra St. Brown. The guy just doesn't see less than 8 targets a game. Target share has been through the freaking roof recently, and they're using him in the red zone now. He's scoring touchdowns. He's just a machine. The guy's going to, he's got by averages at least, about a 20-point floor, needs about 24 points to hit value. He's just too cheap. He should be an $8,500 player. He's not. He's in my lineup. I don't think we need to go this high. I don't love the cash matchups. Tournaments, different story. We'll talk about those in about 15 minutes, but I don't think we need to go Diggs, Brown, Chase, Lamb, Jefferson. I've already got Cook. I'm not going any higher. I'm not going to use 2 Vikings. Metcalf, questionable, might not even play, plus Lockett's the better play. This is really where the money is right here. Picking out which guy from this group of 3, Godwin, Kirk, and Lockett, really makes sense for cash. Godwin's target share is stupid. I mean, he's just 10, double digit every single week, but he doesn't get in the end zone. But again, he's getting 2x on volume alone. If he puts one in the end zone, he's at 3x. He only needs 19 or so points, 20 points to get there. He struggled to get there, but he's just got that high floor on a week where I just think the ownership is going to be more in the mid range, so we don't need to worry about the fact, oh, well, Jefferson goes for 40. I don't think Jefferson's going to be a cash play this week for people, so I'm not really as concerned. I do love the target volume. Christian Kirk. Do have some worries about Trevor Lawrence with his feet moving around in the pocket, but he has a really nice target floor. Got there last week on volume alone, which I love. Has been there with the targets. Strongly considered him for cash this week. Ultimately, I'm not going to end up using him because I just, it could be more of a grinded out game. Tennessee's going to want to speed the game up just by running the ball and just letting that clock run. And I don't think they're going to need to throw as much. And then I worry about Lawrence. Lockett was strongly in consideration as well. Target volume's there, and the touchdown production's been great, but the target volume hasn't turned into big games. Like, he's needed those touchdowns to hit value. He needed it to get there 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. He needed that touchdown. And then when he didn't get the touchdown, didn't hit value over here. It's value-ish here, hits value here without the touchdown, but he really needs those touchdowns in order to hit value. So I don't want someone who's so target dependent or touchdown dependent. So in this range, that leaves me with Chris Godwin. I'm fine with Chris Godwin in this range. I like Devonta Smith, but the weather in New York's a little crappy, as I said. Plus, the target volume's there, but he's still not putting up 18 to 20 points unless he gets in the end zone. I'm not needing to go there in cash. The other guy we're going to use in cash is Garrett Wilson. That target volume's been great since, it's been great all year, but really with Mike White, 23 targets the last 2 weeks, got there on volume last week, which is great. Has gotten there on volume a couple times this year, right? Got there on volume in week 9 against Buffalo, which is wonderful. Got there on volume against New England in week 8, which is great. And now he's got a better quarterback in play. So I think Wilson's still too cheap. He's probably a $6,500 player. Honestly, Godwin's too cheap, so I'm really happy to put them in there. Tight end, there's really 2 ways to go for me in tight end. It's Kelsey, which we can't afford, and I don't think people should try to afford it against a really good Denver defense. He's more of a tournament play. And Kansas City's been weird lately. They've really been weird with the way that they're using their players, especially inside the red zone. They're trying to get way too cute. Now, that could overcorrect this week, and Kelsey could go back to another 3-touchdown game where they just bump it to Kelsey every time, and that would be fine. Love using him in tournaments. $7,600. He needs a 23, 24-point game, and he's gotten there only a couple times in the last month and a half, 2 months. So, I don't think we need to spend up. None of the other tight ends in this range work for me for cash. Hawkinson's the closest, but, 6 targets is great, but is he getting 15 points on volume? No. Yes. It's been a long time since he got there on volume, and so I'm not ready to spend $5K when I go all the way down. A lot of people are interested in Dulcich. Fine. He's fine with Cortland Sutton out. Dulcich is in play. I think Jerry Jeudy's in play. But I'm not loving Russell Wilson. He did get there on volume last week. He needs about 9-10 points. He got there on volume in week 8, had a couple of down weeks in between. I think we have just as risky of a play that we can save $700 on as we get there. We're not going to use Daniel Bellinger, though there's a lot of love for him. And he does. He's getting 3 to 5 targets. But again, meh. I'm not thrilled with Daniel Bellinger. I'm not going to use Evan in there. Moving down, Jordan Akins is in play for me against Dallas. I do think Houston's going to have to throw. A Houston passing game could be sneaky as one-offs. We're not stacking the Houston passing game, but I do, Akins has had 11 targets the last weeks. But Davis Mills doesn't love him, and so that's a concern for me. So he's more of a tournament option for me, though I did consider him in cash. But for me, I just think we need to go right to Chig Okonkwo. He's been getting the target share, 10 targets the last 2 weeks, and he has had a long catch, a catch over 20 yards, 1, 2, 3, 4 of 5 weeks. And he had another 23-yarder earlier in the year. So the guy gets downfield, and he can get there on volume. He needs 8 points to get there on volume. He's gotten close, got there last week. If he happens to get in the end zone, he's a smash. He will probably be the chalk at tight end, maybe behind Dulcich. But I don't think he's any less reliable than Dulcich. So I'm going to go in there and use Okonkwo and save that money and use that money for something that I don't ever do. But I am feeling that Dallas Cowboys defense this week. I love the Cowboys. I love they've just been insane this year. Like, you don't spend up for defense. It's one of the heat map / bankster mantras. Don't spend up for defense. But this Cowboys defense has been so stupid good. Their sack volume is super high. They're not giving up any points. They're not giving up passing yards. They were giving up some rushing yards, but I just don't see Houston being able to rush when Dallas puts up 3 quick touchdowns. They're turning the ball over. They're getting in the backfield. They've scored double-digit points so frequently, 4 times in their last 6 weeks. They haven't scored below 4 points, though. If you get 4 points for $3,800, you really need 10 points. Like, we need 10 points out of this defense. And there's other options at defense that we can use, right? I think Titans are a play potentially against Jacksonville, especially with the banged up Lawrence. But Tennessee hasn't done anything the last few weeks, and they're very susceptible to the pass, which is what Jacksonville does best. I do think that the 49ers are in play because we've seen Tampa kind of get rolled a little bit this year, and they've got a really good front seven. Bosa's going to play, and they're putting up points like crazy. And I do think they're going to step up with Jimmy G out. I do think the Niners defense knows this is what's going to carry them to the playoffs. They're just not giving up any real life points other than that one game against Kansas City. And they're scoring almost as well as Dallas. The problem is the matchup's not as good. Speaking of Tampa, I think Tampa's in play a little bit because they're facing a rookie quarterback. Good sack volume, decent floor, but not as much of a ceiling. They had a couple ceiling games early in the year, but other than that, they're not a big ceiling. I do love Pittsburgh this week going against the backup quarterback. And if Tyler Huntley is running around a lot, that opens up the field for more sacks. I do think there will be enough volume in terms of passing, 25 to 30 pass attempts. And they're just a decent front seven that can get in the backfield, disrupt the quarterback. And I think that makes sense. And also I like Carolina down at 2,200. Again, they're disruptive. If they get in the backfield, they cause problems. They don't give up a lot of real points. They surely haven't been the last few weeks. They do get run on quite a bit, but Ken Walker's out. DJ Dallas should be out. I do love the Seattle offense, and I'm stacking them quite a bit this week, but Panthers defense for 2,200 is a nice cheap play. But for me, I'm actually going to break a rule, and I am going to use that Cowboys defense this week. They're not even the most expensive, which is interesting to me. So that leaves me $3,300 for a flex. Obviously, it's going to be a wide receiver. And I talked about the Houston passing game. There are some other options at this price. Well, we're $100 away from Kendall Hinton. Laviska Shenault could be in play. Sky Moore, I think, is always in play for cash because last week he got no targets, but he has been getting a decent target volume. But for me, the play this week is Philip Dorsett. He needs 9 points. He doesn't need to do much of anything. He needs a little bit of volume. Brandon Cooks out. Nico Collins out. Davis Mills, who is a better quarterback than Kyle Allen, will be in at quarterback. Houston's going to have to throw. I don't think, and Dorsett, it's not that I don't think, Dorsett does not need to score to hit value. 4 catches, 50 yards, we are at value. And I know we're using the Cowboys defense, and I don't like to use a defense against an offensive player, but like, at $3K, I don't mind sneaking him in there so I can spend up for both my running backs and kind of for all 3 of my wide receivers. If we didn't use the Cowboys defense, we go down to, let's say, Carolina at 2,200. That 1,600 more, so I'm at 4,900. Where is the love at $4,900? So if I go all the way down to Carolina, who are my options at $4,900? And tell me how much safer they are. George Pickens, you can't fit in. Homer, you can't fit in. Now, potentially Peoples-Jones, if Cooper's out, maybe. But then I'm doing Dorsett and the Cowboys or Peoples-Jones and the Panthers. And I think that Dorsett is not that much bigger of a risk than Peoples-Jones. Thielen's not cash worthy. We don't know what's going to happen with Tony Jones. James Cook, I like. I could use him, but again, we don't know. But then again, it's Cook and the Panthers or the Cowboys and Dorsett, and I think Dorsett could see just as much work. And then where else are we going to go? Freiermuth, I'm not going to use a double tight end. Dalton Schultz, not going to use a double tight end. Jamison Williams had 1 target. DJ Chark's a great play, but I'm not using 2 Detroit pass catchers. This is the guy I might use. If I were to go down, I might use DJ Chark and then spend up to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it'd be Chark and the Steelers versus Dorsett and the Cowboys. But you are putting so much into that Detroit game that if Minnesota finds their secondary, you are screwed in cash. And I don't want to screw myself in cash. So this is the lineup I'm going with for cash this week, and I'm not going to change it. Timed out perfectly. Let's take a quick look now at inactives. There shouldn't be anything too major happening right now. It's a fairly straightforward week. Let's see. James Robinson inactive for the Jets. Kind of understood there. Ty Johnson got active above him a few weeks ago, which means Bam Knight and Michael Carter are active. I do think that's going to be a pretty even split between the two. Hayden Hurst is out. Okay, we knew that. I'm not using Wilcox as a backup. Let's see who else is inactive. Zach Wilson's inactive again. Okay. This is weird not having Gutta here to talk through this with me. Saquon Barkley active. That was kind of a big one. They said they try him out in pregame and see. He is officially active, so that's good. Jalen Tolbert inactive, which we kind of knew, but James Washington is active. Not a play, but not in love. Let's see. Bills inactive. Jordan Phillips out. Xavier Rhodes out. Good for Garrett Wilson. Good for Bam Knight. Treylon Burks, as expected, is out. Amari Cooper is active, so Peoples-Jones is no longer remotely in the cash conversation. And I do like Cooper in tournaments. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Oh, my boy Tom Kennedy is out this week for the Lions. Just means Jameson Williams will be on the field. Let's see, where else are we looking through? Nothing big with the Jaguars. Lawrence is playing as expected. Everyone's going to be on a Conquo this week. It's going to be ugly. Three players from the Detroit front seven are out, which is pretty good for Dalvin Cook, which I like. Amari Cooper is reportedly on a pitch count, but we saw what happened with pitch counts before. Sometimes they are not pitch counts. Let's see, Amari Cooper, active. Oh no, Paul Silas has died. The Basketball Hall of Famer. I've met him once at a grocery store I worked at. He's a very nice man. Sad to see. Let's see, anything else exciting? Very weird without Gutta doing this part. Nothing too crazy with the Eagles. Kyer Elam is active for the Bills. That's not great for Garrett Wilson, but I'm still playing him. Matt Milano and Deion Dawkins are active for the Bills. Not great for the Jets exposure, but I'm still playing Garrett Wilson. All right, I think we're probably good. I think I've got the majority. If I see anything else, I think we're all right. And one last flip through here to be sure, and then we move on with tournaments. We will get out nice and early today. All right, let's rock and roll. If you have questions, please send those questions in too, so it's not just me yammering on about whatever it is I want to yammer on about. I do yammer quite a bit. All right, let's talk about tournaments. Cleveland, Cincinnati. This game, I think, sets up nicely for tournaments. From the Cincinnati side, Joe Mixon's going to be very popular. So Joe Burrow, who is, I've said it before, and I'm going to continue to say it again, he is slowly but surely entering nuclear mode. This is end of year. Joe Burrow. Passing volume's good. Efficiency is great. Getting in the end zone. Running a little bit. Ran a little much for my liking last week just in terms of injury, but that's really good for fantasy. 30 points in 2 out of 3 weeks. Jamar Chase is the guy you're going to want. T. Higgins as well. Definitely want Chase above Higgins. Obviously, look, Chase comes back. I know Higgins got banged up, but that target volume went down. Not a surprise there. And, he was sort of in that sub 10 target range with Chase prior. Chase is the guy to own. I do think Amari Cooper's fine in this matchup. Love Joe Mixon. David Njoku is back. Not a bad run back piece, I suppose. Should see some target volume. Not going out of my way. I have no problem actually stacking this from the Cincinnati or from the Cleveland side. I actually have Deshaun Watson, Cooper, Peoples-Jones, Joe Mixon run back stacks. I think those are fine. probably running those just on early slates more so. And that you are running a little thin there. But if Watson has an old school top 3 quarterback Watson game, he absolutely can support 2 wide receivers. Peoples-Jones reminds me a lot of Will Fuller, who he loved. And so I do think that there's an opportunity for an old school Texans type game with the Hopkins-Fuller role being played by Cooper and Peoples-Jones. But I'm not overdoing it either with that. That's a small share. Moving on to the Jets and Buffalo. We're going to power through this. We're going to be out well before 12 o'clock today, I think. Jets and Buffalo. I think the Buffalo side's interesting because they're going to be pretty low owned this week. Josh Allen's never a bad play, right? Like he's a 30-point-a-week guy, but he hasn't hit 30 points in a lot of weeks. He's once in the last month and a half. But we know he's got that 30-point game in him, and he was there pretty much earlier in the year. But, since his injury, he's been a little bit weaker. He is running the ball more, which is great. He is a tough bastard. So he is going to try to run here probably a little bit. Again, with Allen this week, you're probably running a little bit thin, especially because you're going to want to stack him with at least Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis is purely a dart throw at this point. He has not come through the way we'd hope with volume. Stephon Diggs is, I mean, he's just a volume monster. I think I don't worry about the sauce factor. Diggs is just really good. He's going to get his. He runs a lot of underneath routes. They move him around the field. I'm not really worried about Steph Diggs. Again, not going overboard with him. He's not a catch for me, but definitely if you're running a Bill stack, it starts with Steph Diggs. I'm not in love with any of the other pieces here. We already talked about Garrett Wilson, Gabe Davis. I mean, he's not doing anything with his targets. Like he's just a pure dart throw. I suppose at 5,300, he's worth a look if you're double stacking. But I'm actually using my double stacks with James Cook. I don't often run running backs in my double stacks, but he's got target volume. He's had target volume a lot of the year when he's played significant snaps, 6, 4, 5, 6, and now he's getting more running looks. If you get Cook, and he does end up getting more than 50% of the snaps, and you get Diggs, and you get Allen, you are really covering a wide range of the potential touchdowns in this game. So I do think that's a way to run this stack without overpaying, and you do get to fill a running back spot with an absolute value play. I know Gutta likes James Cook this week, called him in his article one of the keys to this week. I have a lot of James Cook this week. Depends upon if this is a bust week or a Doug wins 10K week, if that's a good sign or not. But I do like that. And then running back from the Jets, it's Garrett Wilson only. Dawson Knox is another option as opposed to Cook. But target volume is very inconsistent with him. Pure punt play, and at his price, I'd rather just use Njoku in the other game or go down to Dulcich and find someone else to stack. Houston, Dallas. I've talked about the Houston passing game as potential one-offs, along with Philip Dorsett. Chris Moore should be in play. He could actually end up being the number one, but I think that because he has carried some target volume, but he's $400 more expensive, does not fit into my build for cash. Tournament play, he's an okay play. He does have some downfield, as does Dorsett. Dorsett's more known for the spectacular catches too, so I'm good there. It's worth noting that Amari Rodgers is supposedly going to be one of the top 3 receivers for the team this week. Yeah, you got to show it to me, buddy. Like, he could have a big game, but you're just punting for the sake of punting at that point. I'm not really into the Dallas passing game, but I don't think anyone is, which probably makes them a tournament play. If they're up 35-0 in the first half, let's say, and it's the passing game that got them there, you are way ahead of the field. For me, the way I'm getting a little different is I'm running both Pollard and Elliott with the Dallas defense. They've both got the opportunity to hit value in this game. I mean, Pollard's been a freaking beast. And so using him here makes a lot of sense. Over on FanDuel, he's $600 cheaper than Zeke Elliott. I've got Pollard everywhere on FanDuel. He's just too inexpensive at $7,500. Yeah, Zeke's 81 over there. He's only 61 here, but that workload's hitting 15, 16, 17. He is getting work in the run game. He's getting so much touchdown equity. If he scores 15 to 18 points, I'm happy at 6K. He does have that 20 to 24 point upside. He pops, he gets me 92 rushing yards, gets that to 100 with 2 touchdowns. That's 25 points, gets a catch, 26 points. Pollard can still put up 25, 30 points. I mean, the upside for this stack, 70 points maybe for Pollard, Elliott, and the defense. I mean, that's massive upside. It's got a low floor, of course, but that's how I'm playing this game for tournaments. I'm not running that back, but if I were to run it back, it would be with Moore or Dorsett. Not really into Dameon Pierce. He just hasn't done it at all lately. He's getting the carries, a little bit of targets, but like, when's the last time he put a decent score? Ultimate thin play here. People are talking up Malik Davis. I don't know why. Got some carries last week, 3, 7, 5. I mean, he carries here and there. I'm not using them. Even in Showdown, he's a little expensive. Not a huge fan here. Question in the chat, or someone's just saying hello. Good morning, Brandon. What does Brandon want to know? Henry is going to be popular. I agree. We're getting there. We're getting there in a couple of games. We'll talk about him. I do think he'll be popular. I also think Henry could be a guy who could absolutely break the slate. So I'm a little concerned about that. We will talk Henry in a few minutes. Moving on to Minnesota and Detroit. This is the game of the day in terms of fantasy goodness. You will want pieces somewhere. Maybe not in every lineup, but you will want exposure. How you play it is what makes it interesting. If you're playing from the Detroit side, I've been doing it 2 ways. I've been doing, obviously it's Goff and Amon-Ra from the Detroit side, but my second piece has gone back and forth between DJ Chark, who is way too cheap at $4,300. $4,300 tells me that maybe DraftKings thinks Jameson Williams is going to get more looks. Right now, I don't see why they wouldn't just keep using Chark. He had a nice week last week. 5 for 98, had those 6 targets. I mean, hit value on volume alone, gets in the end zone, smashes value. That's where I'm at. And so, but the other way I'm stacking it, I talked about this in the cash portion of our show here, was I'm using DeAndre Swift. He seems to have gotten the backfield back in terms of the majority of the workload. Kent believes in Jameson Williams. I'm using him in Rainmakers and Showdown, not so much on the tournament. He's a tournament option for sure. He could be that piece as a one-off or a run back, but I'm not using Jameson Williams in my main Detroit stacks. I am using DeAndre Swift. I like the workload he's getting. He does have the ability to get down the field and break a long one. And at $5,800, that's a really good price for the game environment. If I'm running it from the Minnesota side, obviously it's Cousins. I'm running Jefferson and Hawkinson in the revenge game far more often. And I do think like Hawkinson, Jameson Williams is a decent low-priced mini stack. I'm not using a ton of Thielen this week, though I do think there's an argument to be made that he could be okay. Target volume is mostly there usually. He doesn't score. He's very touchdown dependent. If he doesn't score, he's not going to get you there, even at $4,900. I do love Dalvin Cook, like I said, for cash. I don't mind him at all as a run back play at all in this game either. If you're stacking the Detroit side, Cook could be a really good run back there. And I don't think I'm missing anyone that I like from this game. I'm not using Jamal Williams. He is going to vulture a touchdown, but he doesn't put up a ton of yards, and he's not getting a ton of work. Not interested in the Detroit tight ends. I don't think they're going to feature them to show that they're better off without Hawkinson. They have lost only 1 game, I think, since Hawkinson was traded. So, they've already kind of shown it, right? Should be a really interesting game. Get pieces and just stack like crazy, but then you need lower owned pieces. So that's going to be a very, very, very chalky game. Weather's supposed to be crap in New York, but every week we talk about it when it comes to Jalen Hurts. Sometimes you just play the best guys. And I'm not overdoing it here, but I do have some minimal, exposure to this game because Hurts just keeps putting up the points. And when Hurts gets rolling, he's rolling with his 2 main guys, right? He's rolling with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. A.J. Brown, very wide range of outcomes, but we know what a ceiling game could be, and that's 35 to 40 points. I've got 1 stack, I think, with Jalen Hurts, and maybe an early game where I use the Eagles. Devonta Smith has seen a massive target increase since Dallas Goedert got hurt. So I'm loving the amount of volume he has. If he scores, he hits for you. If he doesn't, it's kind of iffy with the volume. And I would be, if I didn't mention Miles Sanders, Giants have been, according to Gutta, he does the research on this, have been giving up one of the top 3 most amount of running back yards in the last, I think it's second most running back yards in the last 4 weeks. Sanders is getting a fairly decent workload here and there, definitely inside the 5, which is great. Always, if the Eagles get it down inside the 5 and they just run it with Sanders, they don't want to get Hurts banged up. This could be a 2 touchdown type of game for Sanders. So I do think there's something to be said about using him at 6,200 as a one-off in terms of getting some ownership off of the passing game. I read a stat today somewhere on Twitter that Boston Scott has scored 8 touchdowns in 6 games against the Giants. He's fine for Showdown. And I think I had 1 game where I think I did a Philly stack where I just needed the cheapest of running backs. So I just did a full onslaught with Boston Scott and Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. But, like, I don't know. I don't buy into that narrative because the offense is different now. But, just in case, fine for Showdown 2. On the Giants side, Barkley's playing, so Breida is useless. I'm not really running Daniel Jones. Darius Slayton's fine. Richie James I don't love. Isaiah Hodgins is definitely getting some target volume. He's one of my preseason guys, so big fan of him, but not in this game in particular. But again, $3,500. If you want a cheap run back, I don't think you need a run back in this game. And if you do, it makes sense as a cheap run back as well. But I'm not really in love with the Giants side. I think we're starting to see the real Giants right now. Which, as a Giants fan, saddens me, but what are you going to do? Baltimore-Pittsburgh. This game should not carry a huge number because it's got a real low total. It's under 40. I do like the Pittsburgh defense. I don't hate the Baltimore defense. Mark Andrews is the one guy who I think can go completely overlooked. I know Gutta loves him this week because Huntley will be throwing to him. His numbers with Huntley are really good. Averages almost like 7 catches, 100 yards, nearly a touchdown a game with Huntley as his quarterback. Hasn't done it recently at all. Though the volume's kind of there, right? 8, 7, and 7, but he was far better in the beginning of the year when Lamar Jackson was playing better with the big target. But maybe he will get that target volume. So I do think there's an argument to be made for Mark Andrews as a one-off in tournaments, though you might do a mini stack with him and Najee Harris. A lot of love in the mid-5 or upper 5K, low 6K range for everyone not named Najee Harris, particularly DeAndre Swift, Ezekiel Elliott. Those guys are seeing a lot of love. So, but why not Harris in this matchup? He's getting volume, not seeing as many targets as I would like, which really is disappointing, but is getting volume in the run game and has some inside the 5 equity. So if you wanted to get a little crazy, particularly on an early slate, Harris with Andrews works. I like Tyler Huntley. He was in consideration for me in cash, except that Goff's only $100 more. But he will run. He will get you that floor in game, and he does have ability in the pass game. He is a good quarterback. I tweeted this last week, and I truly believe it. I think the best thing for Baltimore to do is to let Lamar walk and let Tyler Huntley be their quarterback next year. Save a ton of money, spend up elsewhere, because I don't think Tyler Huntley is that much of a drop-off from Lamar Jackson. You can at me all you want. He's maybe 70% of Lamar Jackson, but it'll cost a fraction of the price. Better for the team, and I think he's fine. He does a lot of what Lamar Jackson does, just not quite as well. Pickens, in terms of tournament play, I think he's going to be actually a little bit popular. He made some noise this week, and squeaky wheel gets the grease. Baltimore secondary has gotten better, but can still be beat. Pickens has a flair for the dramatic. He's a guy I would take a shot at, but I do think his number ought to be pretty high at this range. At only $5,000 as a more value type wide receiver, but he's another guy we can take a look at for Pittsburgh if you want to run back with Andrews. On to the Jacksonville, Tennessee game. We are flying today. I love this. On to the Jacksonville, Tennessee game. Brandon talked about Henry going to be popular against the Jags. Agreed. And I've been gaining more Henry in tournaments this morning. I kind of realized, I have no Henry. He could break a slate, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. You're talking 33 points plus whatever he can do in the passing game. He can be 35, 36 points. Could end up the highest scoring running back on the slate. So I am using him in tournaments. Obviously, I'm using a lot of Okonkwo just at his price point. I think he just allows you to do a lot more elsewhere. And we talked about the fact when we were talking about cash that he's just as risky as anyone else. But the fact that he's a downfield threat means he could actually bust a 40-yard touchdown. Like, what if his 40-yard catch this week happens to go in the end zone? That's 6 extra points, 3 for 50, but one of those is a 40-yard touchdown. Now you're talking 14 points, absolute smash play. So, in a tournament, that makes a lot of sense, even if he carries a big number. Again, Kirk, I think a tournament only, but I do like his volume in general. Not really interested in the rest of the passing game. I guess with Burks out, Westbrook Akina can make some sense, but he's really running thin. I'd rather just use Okonkwo for that, running down the seam, because that's where Burks does a lot of his work, is in the middle of the field, and that's where Okonkwo is better at. I still think Robert Woods is going to have those same kind of routes because Woods will run far more underneath, whereas Okonkwo can work the middle of the field, and Akina is more of a downfield threat. So that's, I think, where that is going to work. Not in love with the quarterbacks here, though. Lawrence is priced well enough that if you wanted to play this side, you could. we've seen he's got the 20 to 30 point upside, and then you're going to bring the two receivers with him, maybe Ingram with him as well. Not loving ATN this week. Tennessee's defense isn't awful in the front seven, so I'm just not at ATN this week. I don't think we need to push too much in this game outside of Henry, Okonkwo, and maybe Christian Kirk. I just don't see this being a high-scoring game. KC Denver. This could be one of those weird weeks where Patrick Mahomes is the low-owned, spend-up to be contrarian type of a play. Like, who's going to want to play Mahomes against Denver? But we've seen Mahomes against really good defenses. Let's slide right here. San Francisco, week 7. San Francisco is one of the best defenses in the league. They've destroyed everyone. He went 423-3 for 31 points. Like, that's the kind of upside we're looking at against a good defense from Patrick Mahomes. He pulls that kind of a number, pulls in two receivers with him. You have hooked yourself up with a really good week at a low ownership. I'm using Kelsey with pretty much any Mahomes stack I have, because when Kelsey, when Mahomes goes off, that increases the chances Kelsey goes off. Like, Kelsey went 6 for 98 against San Francisco, but they're one of the best teams in the league against tight ends. He just gets 2 more yards and a touchdown there, right? Now you're talking 16, 19, 25 points, and we're feeling very good about Kelsey. I like using Juju Smith-Schuster is coming down enough in price where he's usable. I know Gutta likes him. I'm not in love with the target volume. They just keep the ball to Valdez-Scantling, who just sucks. But he is seeing that target volume, particularly downfield. $4,100, he's worth the play. But I'm getting a little sneaky here. This is another one of those stacks where I'm going to save money at the running back position, and I'm using Jerick McKinnon a little bit this week. He's got some open field breakaway speed and maneuverability in the open field. It does get the right kind of games, and if he puts one in the end zone, this 10, 11 points that he got just in the passing game, he scored last week. 10, 11 points passing game can turn into 16, 18, 20 points. Again, it's a tournament play. It's a thin tournament play, but it's a cheap tournament play. Get you off some of that James Cook. I do think he's viable in that exact same range. I do have one Denver stack, because what if this is the week Russell Wilson does it, right? It's not. But at $5,100, he needs 20 points. 20 points for a quarterback is not that much. Like, he can do it in the right environment, so maybe this is the week. Because then you could stack cheaply with Dulcich and Jerry Jeudy, who I think could see a decent target share this week. I'm just 4 last week, but I think we could see him in that 11 to 12 range. Gutta really likes Kendall Hinton this week. $3,400. You can't argue too much about the price, and we've seen him have decent high target games. Kansas City secondary isn't great. This game is in Denver, but my preferred way to stack this would be with Dulcich, along with Jerry Jeudy to go with Russell Wilson. He's also got some downfield ability for a tight end. And then I run it back. I've been actually double running it back with Kelsey and McKinnon, or Kelsey and Juju, or Kelsey and Valdez-Scantling. Like, I don't know. If Denver's going off at the QB position, then Mahomes is probably keeping up on the other side. So we want to get some action on the run back plays. My favorite low-owned stack of the week has been Mike Evans and Deebo Samuel. I don't see anyone using those guys. Evans hasn't scored in like a month and a half. It's been forever. The last time he scored a touchdown it's like 2 months now. He scored week 4. Like, that's it. He has 3 touchdowns this year. At some point, Mike Evans is going to be Mike Evans again. I need more target volume, but his price is down to the point where he makes for a fun little tournament play, especially with so many people going to Godwin this week. Same thing with Deebo. His price is just down a lot. And with Brock Purdy in there, we saw, look what happened last week. Those rushing attempts went up a little more. They're down to, Jordan Mason's was fine. He was a good backup, but McCaffrey and Samuel are so much more dynamic. So maybe we start to see 8 to 10 targets from Purdy, 4 to 6 runs. We know when he gets those runs out of the backfield, he just has a propensity for busting 30-yard touchdowns. And so I think it's $6K. It's definitely worth a shot. So I'm not stacking this game heavily, but I do like Evans and Samuel in GPPs where I'm using Godwin more in cash. Though I do have a little bit of Godwin in tournaments too with Samuel, just in case. McCaffrey as well should see a ton of work. So I am using him in tournaments. But again, Tampa's defense is so good that I'm not comfortable with him in cash yet, because he would need in cash to get 25, 26 points. And he's only done that twice in his 5 weeks with 49ers. I understand that he's learning the playbook and blah, blah, blah. But I'd rather use him in tournaments at this week, particularly at his price point. I'd rather use Henry in cash. And obviously, the guys I'm using in cash, I'd rather use. Not using any of the quarterbacks in this game. We're not full stacking. It's mini stacks only. If Leonard Fournette is ruled out, then Rachaad White becomes a play. Just the target volume is stupid. Like when Leonard Fournette's out, he sees a ton more snaps. You get like 40% snaps when Leonard Fournette plays, but even with those 40 to 50% snaps, he has 17 targets the last 2 weeks, which is great. And he had 23 carries. So when he's on the field, he touches the ball and he's good. So let's, consider him. Particularly, I like using him in the afternoon only slate, the 3-game slate. I kind of like using him a lot. And then Carolina, Seattle, Donta Foreman's getting a lot of love because Seattle's so bad against the run. But if they get down Carolina, they're not going to use Foreman because Foreman doesn't catch passes. I do have Foreman in some lineups as a mini stack, the Carolina defense, in case Geno Smith remembers he's Geno Smith. But maybe Geno Smith is just good. Like maybe it just took some time to get there, and he's Brad Johnson or Rich Gannon, who needed just to sit on the bench for a while and just mature and be a game managing quarterback with upside, right? Jeff Hostetler, like that's who this guy reminds me of. And those are guys who all won Super Bowls. Steve Berline didn't win the Super Bowl, made it to a Super Bowl. So that's the kind of guy that Geno Smith reminds me of. So maybe he doesn't suck. I like Travis Homer as a tournament play quite a bit. Using him a lot. Ray's got him super duper cheap, unless people are buying them with my significantly marked up price. I do love it. If you're in Rainmakers, by the way, get in touch with me. We will talk about Rainmakers. I love Rainmakers. Don't love Tony Jones here. Love Geno Smith. Probably one of my 3 favorite stacks is Seattle, especially because it's in the late slate. I love having afternoon minutes, and this week the afternoon slate isn't quite as good as the early slate. But we've got a guy who's gone over 20 points in 4 straight weeks, multiple touchdowns in all but 2 games this year. And he has such a concentrated target tree. It's Metcalf and Lockett, and it's Lockett, then a little more Metcalf. And so I love Lockett in this spot. He's been getting in the zone. I'm double stacking Metcalf and Lockett with Geno quite a bit. I'm not always doing a run back, but we do know that Metcalf has, slate breaking ability. If those 15 targets and 11 receptions were more downfield, he had a higher ADOT. This could be 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then, again, slate breaking. I do think he plays. If he doesn't play, Marquise Goodwin he'd be a great play to have. But he does have terrible hands, but he can get down the field, and we've seen him have some decent games this year. So keep an eye on that and be ready to make some pivots on your Metcalf plays, because then you can move down on Metcalf and move up to someone else. Have a couple of swaps that you can do for a late swap. Laviska Shenault's getting some love. I don't know. I have like 1 share of Shenault this week because he does have the ability to pop one, but like it's real thin. We're running real thin if we're running Laviska Shenault this week. I'd rather use the Houston receivers or Sky Moore. That's it. Look at that. It's 12 o'clock and we are done. Should I build? No, I can't build more. Should I build another lineup? Let's talk. Let's think this out. Do I want to build another lineup? No, I'm very comfortable with the lineups I have this week. I really don't want to build another lineup this week. I think I'm spending far more than I normally would. Okay, so let's talk about how this week's going to go. What things are we going to talk about? I know Gutta would say, based on what I've read from him, James Cook will be the best value running back on the slate, and I'm going to speak for Gutta. He will get 15 points for James Cook, including a touchdown. And so these are Gutta's predictions, though I'm not opposed to them. And he will say Kendall Hinton will get 5 catches and be the highest scoring Denver pass catcher. I'm making it up for Gutta, just totally lying. But based on his article, I know he likes those guys. And Mark Andrews will be a top 3 scoring tight end this week. Those are 3 predictions from Gutta. Even though Gutta, you know what? Mark Andrews will be the top scoring tight end. That's a prediction from Gutta. That's probably bullshit, but he does like Mark Andrews. Let's see. For me, who is going to be amazing this week? Philip Dorsett catches a long touchdown, though he may only have 2 catches, but one of them will be a long touchdown. And DeAndre Swift is a top 5 running back this week. That is it for this week, folks. This has been Heat Map Fantasy Sports NFL Live. I am Doug Shane. Come check us out. Come check me out on Twitter at Bankster17. Check my pinned tweet. You can find out the You can get the link to sign up to be a member of Heat Map Fantasy Sports. You be a member of our Slack chat and get all of our heat maps and all of our articles for every sport, and we cover all of them for less than $4 a week, less than a Starbucks coffee, and you will win money because that's what we do. Well, you can maybe join the Comma Club. That's the people who've won $1,000 or more on a tournament entry, which we seem to do pretty regularly. Check us out. Thank you for a wonderful week. I enjoyed the show greatly, and we will see you next week. Have a great Sunday.